We're kinda short-lived, aren't we? Everyone on here died around 30. Washuu that are not of the main family, like you, Furuta, Arima, and Kaiko branches happen to be that way. Yes. Are we ill? No. It is your blood. Our ancestors were selfish. It is not yet a tale I can tell you. I see. I guess I've just got to do everything I want to in the time that I have, huh? Souta Washuu Furuta single-handedly serves as many things to the narrative of Tokyo Ghoul, an insanely witty and intelligent antagonist, a foil to some of the most important characters in the series, an absurdist, a child soldier of the greatest power in the world, and even more. Throughout the story of Tokyo Ghoul, this character is written with so many intricacies, making it very difficult to really articulate just how amazing yet tragic of a character he is. Furuta would be born into this world as a half ghoul, half human, and would come to understand that due to this, him and those who share similar origins as him would only live at most 30 years. Correctly rationalizing this unfair truth of his existence as the fault of the Washuu, he would accept that life is inherently pointless and seek to destroy the Washuu clan himself. With this thought in mind, Furuta would be raised in a Sunlit Garden, where all those like him were shown one way to live and be exposed to nothing else. Trained to eliminate all ghouls and be a soldier to serve that cause until you die. There is no love for you, nor is there the normal life that you see everybody else have. You probably won't even be remembered. Furuta was not truly valued in any way, nor would Furuta ever have the chance to create innate value in himself by going on to live a normal life. To Furuta, the world created him as something with no other purpose than to kill or be killed. Life and death were almost synonymous from his perspective. Compared to others, his life was ultimately meaningless and predetermined to be so, thanks to the Washuu and the world itself. So why not try to enjoy it as much as possible? Starting with destroying the people who stole a life of meaning from me. Throughout the story of Tokyo Ghoul, Furuta would be responsible for many of the events that took place, single-handedly controlling the entire narrative and many of the lives of the characters in the fourth quarter of the story. Furuta would actually manage to eradicate the entire Washuu clan. He would destroy the CCG, its reputation, and expose all of its twisted morals from the inside out and create the dragon itself, a problem too big for the world to continue ignoring. Furuta would also be responsible for many events in Kaneki's life just going completely wrong, starting with him being the one who dropped the steel beams on Kaneki in the first place, almost killing him and beginning the events of Tokyo Ghoul. Tokyo Ghoul is simply a story that ironically cannot exist without Furuta, the character who finds everything in the world to be meaningless. Although Furuta does so much in this story in retrospect that I could probably write up an entire hour video detailing all of the crimes, schemes, and evil things he does in the story by just listing and describing them, let alone really breaking them down and analyzing them, I find the most ingenious and best example of his schemes to be laid out in how he controlled the operations of the CCG and the clowns after exterminating majority of the Washuu clan and running out the rest of the CCG, leaving him to be the only potential candidate to operate it. But I think we need to understand the context of the CCG and its role in the story before understanding why Furuta decides to do what he does here. The CCG is the Commission of Counter Ghoul, the organization created by the Washuu that recruits and trains ghouls investigators in order to, as their namesake suggests, investigate ghouls that may be integrated into society, or just exterminate ghouls no matter what they're doing. The true purpose of this organization is to simply paint ghouls as villains in order to maintain a status quo that keeps them on top of the world. As Furuta himself says while speaking to Eto while she was imprisoned by said organization in chapter 66, I think that even if the world is oddly shaped, as long as there's a balance, it's okay. Unfortunately, I'm on the side of the ostracized. Furuta here spits out a truth that most CCG investigators understand, yet will do nothing about. Amon Kotaru, the deuteragonist of the first half of Tokyo Ghoul, serves as our eyes for the CCG and how they typically operate. Amon at first preaches about how he'll exterminate all ghouls and all that type of stuff, the typical things you would expect from a normal person in a world such as Tokyo Ghoul. Of course, they eat up all the propaganda about ghouls being evil if enough people said it in their day-to-day lives, and couple that with some of the experiences with ghouls that they could have had. They believe what they do is genuinely right. Amon eventually does come to question his belief about ghouls after facing Kaneki enough times, and despite this, he would still choose to fight the ghouls without question, and he is not the only character to do such a thing either. It's only until Amon returns in Re as a ghoul that he begins to take real action against the system. This is kind of why I think that Furuta's official debut in the story is why Amon's role as a deuteragonist was stripped away from him, because at that point, Furuta really started setting things into motion and Amon's primary role just wasn't as important anymore. If anything, Takizawa even did a better job at displaying a CCG investigator turned ghoul and how investigators would react to seeing something like this than Amon did. So with the CCG and their role explained, I circle back to Furuta's purpose in taking over the entire system of the CCG and screwing with it the way he did. A lot of characters within the world who are not ostracized, or in other words, on the bad end of things, simply follow the orders they're given and do not make their own decisions. These characters continue to choose the actions that they do because, well, they're normal people who get to live full and normal lives despite what they choose to do here. Because they are not the ones who suffer from the results of the system that hunts down ghouls and paints them down as the ultimate villain that everyone must unite against. Furuta, on the other hand, never had a chance to live a full life, make his own fate, anything of the sort, because this system exists, and it created him with the sole purpose of doing nothing but being raised as a child soldier to eliminate ghouls for as long as he lives, although it's not even long in the first place. I mean, think about it. This is why Sui Ishida would plant investigators in the story that were completely out of pocket with how they treated ghouls such as Mado and Kijima, yet nobody would really question it or try to stop these two characters, and that's because 1, it maintains the status quo, and 2, it doesn't really affect the other investigators' personal lives, with Furuta's primary goal being to destroy the Washuu and the system that ruined his life before it began. Of course he would want to end the CCG. So how do you do this? Make everybody see. Make it a problem that nobody can ignore. Put them in situations where you test their morality, character, and even put their lives in danger. By proxy, this would be the final nail in the coffin of the Washuu and their history, as the system they use will be completely destroyed once everybody in society is forced to confront the culmination of it head on. Furuta using the CCG, and sometimes the clowns, would do many things to force the entire cast into action, or at least he would attempt to, all the while ridiculing the morality of the CCG and their system. He would stage the public execution of the ghouls, but people would simply watch and even enjoy the show, and Kaneki, the one-eyed king himself, would still not come out to challenge him or do anything about it. It's pointless. He would preach super peace and have his subordinates exterminate ghouls ruthlessly, as he would speak about the world becoming more peaceful. It was all a mockery of the system itself happening right in front of their eyes, and not a single soul took action against them. Furuta, due to the incompetence of the world, would be forced to evolve it himself. This is the purpose of the dragon, a threat so great that you can no longer sleep it away. The world has to see, there must be an explanation for it, and you must take action. This thing and the product of it will be a part of your daily lives, and all previous systems, including the one that ruined Furuta's life, must be abolished for this to be managed. You people now need ghouls more than ever, and chapter 149 has Kano paint this out clearly, as he himself says that the truth that the Washuu attempted to hide is now in the open thanks to that thing, and ghoul research can finally move forward. Now, they'll realize the medical applications. This is why the dragon's creation was such a huge deal in the story. This serves as only one example of the amount of pull and control that Furuta has over the narrative and how deep it goes. I do recommend rereading the story if you haven't after this video, because I'm sure that there's even more examples of this that I didn't notice. I also think Kano's appearance and self-removal is a great time to put in my thoughts about Furuta attempting to revive people. And my thoughts on this aspect of this character is that Furuta more than likely knew that this wasn't ever possible, and it was a pointless effort. Kano's final scene putting a decent chunk on his mother as he speaks about the future of ghoul medicine in the world only confirms this to me, because Furuta would only know as much as Kano does anyway. He also just straight up admits to it being near impossible after the appearance of the dragon. All this to say, Furuta was certainly no joke of a villain, especially when it came to his macro goal. Furuta does a lot of stuff that he probably didn't need to in order to realize this, but you have to remember, he also wants to have as much fun as he can with the world while making his goals come to fruition. So a lot of his plans do turn out to be extra, and there are certain parts of his character that you kind of have to guess on. Another thing about Furuta and his scheming is that he was present since the very beginning of the original story. I briefly mentioned this earlier, but I want people to understand that Furuta having these mysterious appearances throughout the original story of Tokyo Ghoul, even interacting with Toka at the university as at the time a random extra, makes him infinitely more interesting and adds a lot of reread value to it as a whole. The original story did conclude with Kaneki pointing out that he witnessed a clown who was Furuta, but at the time of release was only referred to as Souta, dropping the steel beams on him. Kaneki would say that even at his death, he still doesn't know what that means. The page displaying Furuta in his Souta persona just laughing at Kaneki, as that was Kaneki's final memory before he became Heisei. It was quite haunting at the time. The original and unspoiled impact of this page does wonders for his character almost 10 years later, and I kind of feel bad for anybody who didn't get to experience both the initial reading of this at the end of the first series, and then the slow revelation during the second that Furuta is actually Souta, the clown you've thought of constantly as you've entered and experienced the beginning parts of the second series. I'm sure that Furuta had more appearances in the original story before his official debut, but my point here is that Furuta had always been scheming and actively present in the story since the very beginning. You really don't find this out until the beginning of the Root Island arc in Tokyo Ghoul Re. To wrap this part of Furuta's character up, if you think he may have played a role in a certain part of the narrative, he probably has. A lot of people did not like Furuta because it initially seemed like he just popped up and made everything go his way without trying, but when rereading the story, you notice that he was truly always there. Furuta has an unmatched presence, and it's not just the story telling you this, it's genuinely shown if you are able to notice it. I think I got my point across there, so let's pivot on to another part of Furuta's character that I truly enjoy. His character foils. First would be another character who would attempt to destroy the system Furuta was stuck in, this being Arima. The Reaper of the CCG was a character who was stuck in the same exact predicament as Furuta, being raised in the Sunlit Garden as just another child soldier. One that would actually accept his role as someone who only exists to take the lives of ghouls. Of course, at the end of Arima's time, we would find out that he also sought the extermination of the Washuu by propping up Kaneki as a leader of the ghouls and having him carry on his will as the One-Eyed King. To get into the dynamic of Arima and Furuta, these two characters would both be defined by their predetermined fates as child soldiers. However, Furuta made the promise to Rize that they would someday get married, live happy lives, things of that nature. Only that the bombshell dropped on him that he wouldn't be able to do any of that and not even live to age 30. Understanding that his predecessor stole his own path from him, a life that he'd always want but never have, is what pushed Furuta into nihilism. Arima, on the other hand, did not seem to have anything like a first love, but through taking the lives of so many and so easily, he would likely question his purpose and ask if this is all life has to offer, leading him up to the proposal that Eto made to create the One-Eyed King in order to tear down the system that never allowed him to define himself as anything but a murderer. Of course, Arima would not adopt the same pessimism that Furuta had, developing a father-son relationship with Kaneki and crying out of joy that Kaneki was able to prove him wrong. Kaneki's existence allowed him to be anything but a Reaper. Furuta, on the other hand, would die wishing he could have lived a life that would allow him to have any kind of family. Arima just did not have to deal with the heartbreak of having his entire future ripped away from him because he didn't believe he had one that involved anything but killing in the first place. Another foil that Furuta has, and probably the most important one in the entire series, is of course the one with our protagonist, Ken Kaneki. There are two sides of the same coin in every way possible. For example, Kaneki would read fiction as an escape from his abusive mother as a child, whereas Furuta would read non-fiction books in an attempt to discover more about his family. Furuta begins the first act of the story by quote-unquote killing Kaneki, whereas Kaneki would end the final act of the story by literally killing Furuta. I mean, I have to mention the parallels of chapter 86 and 98. I'm sure avid fans have seen this comparison made in every discussion ever, but I still can't skip it. Chapter 86 would have Kaneki declaring himself as the One-Eyed King, whereas chapter 98 would have Furuta declaring himself as the Washuu King. Flip to number 86 and you get 98. The parallels between these two are endless, and no other character could have served as a final hurdle for a protagonist as complex as Kaneki. A parallel between the two characters that I want to focus on is how they wear their masks and carry themselves. Kaneki would create and wear many masks surrounding tragedy, whereas Furuta would do the same surrounding comedy. This is best shown when they would be working together to investigate Eto in chapter 60. Kaneki plays the bad cop and Furuta plays the good cop, with their true natures being the exact opposite of the roles they force upon themselves and each other for the brief period that they would collaborate their efforts. While Furuta would literally wear a clown mask as Souta throughout the first half of the Tokyo Ghoul story, Kaneki was wearing the eye patch mask to play monster as a one-eyed ghoul. Despite all the ways these two characters mirror one another, I think their dynamic has one of the greatest conclusions that I've read. As they confront one another at the bottom of the world in chapter 172, Furuta belittles Kaneki's willingness to actually fight against the dragon and really fate itself every time he speaks, and Kaneki just ignores all of it, remaining silent and going into attack. They both seem so tired of their charade, yet express it in their usual mask. I really want to emphasize how these two characters being sick of one another and expressing it as well as they do adds a lot to this battle. It makes readers, or at least myself, think about everything they've been through, especially Kaneki to reach this point. Every single detail of the entire story between these two characters makes this final confrontation better and better. As the two characters finally fight, their masks drop, with Kaneki declaring at the end of 173 that, once and for all, he truly wants to win against Furuta because he's just tired of losing to him, and that this victory means more than any other before it. And in the middle of chapter 174, Furuta drops some of my favorite quotes in the series in response. "It's not just humans. You've been taking the lives of ghouls when it suited you. You can try to justify it all you want, but you are just a shallow narcissist. It's been fun though, when you tried protecting yourself at Aogiri, when you tried to protect the cafe in the 20th Ward, when you tried protecting your family as Heisei Sasaki, when you tried protecting the Ghoul Nation as the One-Eyed King. You failed at all of that. I love watching every part of it. You can try all you want, but there are some things that you can't change. That's right. You will fail again tonight. You will ruin everything." At the culmination of their battle, the moment Furuta realizes that all of his victories against Kaneki were for naught because he's about to lose here, the opponent he's triumphed over so many times over stands here today with not a thing to say to Furuta, and he doesn't need to. Kaneki at this moment has proven himself correct against his foil in most ways possible, and Furuta's deteriorating mental state serves as a display of Furuta's realization of this. All Kaneki can do at this point is look at Furuta with a pitiful stare, and Kaneki's gesture here is a perfect response to every single detail of this speech. No matter how many times he's failed, he's focused on the present and what comes after. Kaneki feels sorry for Furuta not only because he finally sees the facade break, but he sees the true man behind the many comical masks that he's used. In the end, it was the desperate struggle of another man, one who is quite similar to himself. Another thing I want to add to this quote is that it seems to serve as a victory lap for Kaneki and the readers. We see how far he's come and that he's finally going to bring all the madness to an end. Readers being very proud of Kaneki in the face of all this just reinforces how big of a wall Furuta was, as again, Furuta is the cause of a lot of Kaneki's trials and tribulations in the story. And as Furuta continues his rant, he says killing the Washuu, putting an end to the CCG, taking all these lives. I even unleashed a dragon on the world, but that's still not nearly enough. I want everything. At the end of it all, where his confidence and facade seem to finally be breaking down, Furuta declares that these are the feats that define how far he's come. He's done the impossible by being the man to bring the end to the Washuu clan, the CCG, and unleash the dragon onto the world. These are his greatest achievements, one that should allow him to finally grasp his victory, although we know that they weren't enough for him to do so in the end. Through this desperate proclamation in the following chapters that close his arc, we see his personal goal throughout the story was to clearly destroy the Washuu, the system that created the circumstances of his creation and prevented him from living a happy life with Rize. Furuta, realizing that this wasn't enough, enters into his Kakuja state just to easily be put down by Kaneki as he sees a vision of himself, Rize, and their family, and is finally defeated. Now that it's been 6 years since I've seen this moment, my thoughts on it have changed. I interpret the vision of his family being one that represents a twist on his proclamation of wanting everything, as he mentally deteriorates while fighting Kaneki. Furuta is usually a very tactical and intelligent fighter from what we've seen, always relying on deception. And when he entered that Kakuja state in rage like he did, it stripped all of that away from him, which is why Kaneki was easily able to put him down right after. The claim of Furuta wanting everything is something that he knew can't come true no matter what he did. Furuta screaming that he wants it all, despite knowing that this could never happen from the moment he was told that he died by 30 is no more than a tantrum. Furuta knew that he lost at that point, and the slight vision of Rize proves it. I don't think it's necessarily Rize he was fixated with, but the other life he believes he would have had if he were able to live a long and fair one. This to me explains why Furuta was okay with attempting to kill Rize in the first chapter. Of course, the battle concludes with the two characters having one final chat, but with Furuta explaining why he sees the entire world as pointless and how he came to that conclusion. Kaneki responds with how hard he's fought for everything he has now and why he thinks he had to go through all that, even if it's meaningless. To him, his individual experiences and growth will have meaning. He even says to Furuta, even if it will all be meaningless at some point, he'll continue to strive no matter what, and even find meaning to that. Furuta responds by telling Kaneki that he's the only person he could never understand. Kaneki comes to the conclusion that the world isn't wrong, it just is, and Furuta comes to the conclusion that the world is a wicked place, asking if Kaneki would believe that all Furuta's ever wanted was a normal life. And Kaneki seriously believes it, as he's aware of the Sunlit Garden and what it does to those who are born there. I think this question also hurts Kaneki because not only does it remind himself of what he's always wanted, but it reminds him of the pain that Arima suffered as someone who also had a predetermined fate thanks to the Sunlit Garden. We get Furuta's final thoughts before he passes away, as he thinks about when he and Rize spoke about growing old together. Rize would say that she never wants to be old, with the young Furuta stating that really, it'd be fun. And we see the older Furuta witness this as he's about to pass away. His final words are, yeah, it will be. Despite everything he's done, Furuta wanted something that most other people in the world are guaranteed, just a chance to live a good and fulfilling life. I imagine he's thought of this conversation with Rize many times, and it culminates the heartbreak of his character. At the end of it all, to live a normal life is all he's ever wanted, but in his reality, in his world, he's never had a chance at this. To lash out, he ended up destroying the people who stole his chance to live, and by proxy, the entire system. Furuta is not a noble hero or anything like that though, as he did this out of pure anger and revenge, rather than anything like an attempt to save somebody or the world. I guess judging from his final flashback, you can also conclude that Furuta believed that the purpose of life was to grow old with someone that you love, but from his perspective, since that was never possible to him, it was a reality check that life inherently has no meaning. Despite what I said before, this could be an argument as to why someone can believe that he genuinely wanted to eliminate death from the world using the dragon. At a certain point, Furuta's character has to be left up to interpretation, so I can't believe anyone who believes otherwise. After his defeat at the hands of Kaneki, Furuta's story would end here, reinforcing his predetermined fate, whereas Kaneki's story ends mostly open-ended, as the only formal conclusion that we get is the fact that he and Hide remained best friends for the rest of their lives. Furuta served as one of the best antagonists I've seen, and it's probably going to be better after another read through of Tokyo Ghoul, as there's always something new to notice with this guy every time I read the story. With that said, reread the series, and thank you so much for watching this video. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.